Hello and welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. I am Sabrina Donley with CybrCastle. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with David Lewis. He is the Chief Innovation and Marketing Officer at School Outfitters. David, it's great to have you.
Thank you, Sabrina. It's great to be here.
You know, it's not every day I get the pleasure of getting to interview one of our customers at CybrCastle. So tell us a little bit about what School Outfitters does and your guys' growth over the years.
We try to help educators make better learning environments. And we do that through selling thousands of furniture, fixture, and equipment items, products. We're a national company. In terms of sales, we're a national company. Sometimes we have international sales as well, but that's not what our focus is. We're in 97% of the school districts in the country in some way. Some of those have very high penetration in terms of the products and sort of share of wallet. Some of those are lesser so, but we hope to always increase that. From a corporate perspective, we're an international company. So we have offices in other countries, not just in the United States, such as Mexico, Vietnam, China, some of the typical kind of things, I think. And that we manufacture a good portion of our products. We also get some from traditional suppliers, and then we go direct to manufacturers as well. We certainly are an e-com company, but so we have a fairly well-known website in our industry. But we also have inside sales and some outside sales. We have a strong customer service department. So it really is a blend across all those things that you mentioned.
At first, when we talked, you mentioned, we felt like we were pretty good in that area. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. We've always felt like we were ahead in a lot of areas of technology and even in areas of security, especially for a company that are the size we used to be. So we're about 500 people strong now. At one point, it was more like 100, maybe 140, something along that lines. And so I think historically we felt very strong about our presence, the positioning that we had in terms of infrastructure, and we even had gone through audits. We are PCI compliant. So there just was a lot of pieces and parts that made us feel pretty confident about where we were from a legacy perspective. What started to happen is this recognition that there were new types of attacks. There were these modern threats. And I think, one of the biggest things that happened that made me worry a bit more was when something like SolarWinds, where the very product you're buying that's supposed to help you is the point of injection of a threat. And there were several things like that happened. But then it made me think deeper about, what is our actual security position? Have we wandered a little bit from where we were originally, in terms of how good we were? And suddenly it made me realize, okay, if we did have something happen, we were likely unprepared from a process perspective, unlikely prepared from how our technology is configured, and how would we detect it, how would we mitigate it, and those sort of things. So I then went, so I'm part of what we call a steering team, which is a strategic. Basically it's our executives. And so I went and talked to my peers in that group and said, I'm concerned about this. And they rely heavily on me for these kinds of things. And so if I'm concerned about it, they're concerned about it. And so then we started launching an initiative to understand where we really are and get started on getting a better security position.
When you were small, it might have been as big of a deal, but as you scaled up, the operating cost, tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. I mean, most companies are going to look at the cost benefit of anything they do. And they're also going to look at how they allocate resources and say, is this, in general, is this going to grow revenue, or is this going to cost us some money to do?
Exactly.
So for a long time, at a certain size, the type of security that we had in place was the right type for a cost benefit. A day of being down had X dollars cost. And, you can say that was mostly acceptable. We also, I think, had cyber insurance, and just the nature of it at that time, it seemed like we were covered. But then, yes, we grew a lot. We were on a growth path for a long time, and we just kept growing. And so again, it's one of those. You're right. It's part of that realization of, oh, we're at a size now where a day or 2 days down is a huge number.
Mm-hmm.
And so the cost benefit was no longer the same equation as it was before. And so the cost of mitigating and doing something about security that we had not done so far became much more reasonable for us because it was maybe a third of the cost of being down for a couple of days. So
Sounds like that cost benefit equation was kind of the key decision within this. You mentioned you talked to your steering team, said, hey, we need to do something about this.
Sure.
What process did you start going through when you realized that maybe we need to look into this more?
We went out and canvassed a little bit for companies that we thought might be able to help us. Some of our infrastructure team had peers outside of our company that they talked to, and they'd worked with a few companies locally. It became clear as we went through that process that there were differences in what the companies offered. Most of the companies that we talked to, they would do an audit. A lot of times it was an automated audit. It wasn't even a sort of personalized, we're going to try to understand your business, we're going to try to understand your landscape or your other risks or things like that. It was a very canned kind of audit. And the deliverable from them was just, a printout, you could say, of here's what we found. And then that's where they stopped. And there wasn't anything further that they could really do for us beyond that. So they had, from my perspective, they had optimized their return on doing these kinds of audits, which were relatively expensive for what they were. And yet we needed something that was more than that. We needed somebody who had the resources, skills, capability to help us, resolve whatever was found. We knew for sure there was going to be things that were found. I mean, it's just that all of my experience said that there was going to be something that we needed to do once the audit was complete. And, maybe it was a long list, maybe it was a short list, but it was likely things that we were not experts in. We knew it was also likely a multi-year journey. It just seemed that way. It seemed likely to be that way because we have like I said, we have many locations. We have a fairly sophisticated infrastructure. It just seemed likely that there was going to be more than just a few months of work to do.
So because you knew it was going to take time, sounds like, to mitigate each of those gaps, understanding the business case for those things and prioritizing and journeying was something really important to you, sounds like. One of the key things I see that causes mid-sized companies like yours especially to get stuck is realistic or unrealistic resource allocation. You guys have a pretty big internal IT team, but still they're already kind of up to here, right? With day-to-day tasks. So how did you see CybrCastle helping in that way?
What we needed is for somebody who can engage with those resources, who honestly that could get the confidence of our internal resources as quickly as possible so that there's a strong trust factor. And frankly, help lead us through certain decisions, and lead us through the execution, the technical details of implementing resolutions to these gaps. So, it was really about making sure that the fit was good so that our resources would want to work with whoever we chose, which was CybrCastle. And that is absolutely how it's turned out. I think there's a lot of trust in the CybrCastle resources that we're working with, and they do a great job of complementing, supplementing with our resources and working with our resources in terms of timing too.
So building that trust with your team and being realistic about their time and also how tough it can be to let them touch your critical systems and servers, right?
Right. We have a busy season that is paramount for nothing to go wrong during that time. And so working with CybrCastle, we were able to bring in your resources at the time where there was a window or in a way that one of the things that was very surprising for me is that CybrCastle, gave us confidence that if there was a problem with a change, that they would be able to roll it back easily, which has been true. And so, that actually allowed us to work a little bit during our busy season, which is almost something we rarely do.
Thank you so much for sharing that, David. So as we're wrapping up, is there something you'd like to share to other companies that are starting on that security journey and kind of wondering what to do?
There's aspects of technology and security that, and actually it happens in marketing too, that I label as the Wild West. And so there's a lot of companies that will claim to do something for you, but how good they do it, you almost need it to be demonstrated to you, right? If you choose a company that's only going to give you a list, you're really not going to move the needle forward on fixing the gaps. So I really believe you have to have a company that also can bring in the resources to help you. I think if you're a company our size and you're not doing something about modern threats, you're really leaving yourself vulnerable from an operations perspective, from your customer's view of you. I mean, if your data gets out, if the customer data gets out there and gets abused, your customers are not going to like that. In different ways, they're not going to like it, from either saying, "Well, I can't really trust to do business with you," to just being reluctant. Maybe taking longer to make an order, or wanting some sort of sense of feeling better. So if you get hit by one of these modern threats, it takes weeks for you really, at least maybe a month, I know a few companies that have been hit, and I'll bet you it took them at least a month to really kind of get things operating, feel confident about their environment, figure out how the threat got into how the breach happened. And it's just that noise that you really don't want when you're trying to just operate your business. So you got to get started on the journey. You got to get a picture of what it is, which is the gap analysis, and then you got to just start prioritizing and doing some part of that list, and setting a roadmap for it, even if it's a multi-year roadmap, is far better than just ignoring it.
Wise words, David. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure. Anytime, Sabrina.
Absolutely. Please visit cdomagazine.tech for additional interviews.